Very good evening and welcome. You're watching Primetime News on TV1. It's the 22nd of March 2024. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Piruni Karunaratna. Let's start off with a look at your top stories for tonight.
Unruly group disrupt Sri Lanka Administrative Service Association press briefing. Sri Lanka's former President Sirasa says he knows who the Easter Sunday attack perpetrators are. President in Jaffna awards lands to people via Urume program. Basil meets president once again, indicates that he favours a general election. Dayasiri ready to run for president.
On to your lead story this evening. The Sri Lanka Administrative Service Association convened a media briefing in Colombo to highlight the issues that they face. However, a group that entered the vicinity of the briefing attempted to disrupt its proceedings. Sri Lanka police said that several arrests were made following the disturbance.
The General Assembly of the Sri Lanka Administrative Service Association took place at the Colombo Public Library premises. Later in the day, the Sri Lanka Administrative Service Association convened a media briefing to raise awareness on their issues, including salaries.
We informed about our issues to the President, Treasury and other officials about our issues even before the Central Bank decided to increase their salaries. Around 13,000 executive grade officers as well as grade 2 and grade 3 officers are facing serious issues. We requested for a program to provide them with facilities. We are concerned if we can continue with the Sri Lanka Administrative Service in these circumstances.
However, a group later visited the premises and continued to disrupt the proceedings. Thereafter, the Sri Lanka Administrative Service Association and the Public Library Administration notified the police of the incident. When the police arrived, the group attempted to flee. Thereafter, several of them were detained. Activists from the Janaragala movement attempted to meet with the central bank governor to raise their concerns over the recent CBSL staff salary hike. The activists demanded a meeting with the CBSL governor or a senior officer. However, it led to a confrontation. Security was increased around the central bank and the police made attempts to remove the activists from the area. Thereafter, the group dispersed.
A heated situation arose in Dabre Mawata in Makluduwatta in Narahempita when an attempt was made to vacate the residents belonging to 8 houses built on lands claimed to be belonging to the Road Passenger Transport Authority. Narahempita police, after consulting with the judicial officers, took steps to grant the residents 2 weeks to vacate.
Former Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena has acknowledged his knowledge of the exact perpetrators behind the execution of the 2019 Easter Sunday terror attacks. He made this startling revelation earlier today in Kandy.
We are aware of where the Easter Sunday attacks were executed from. Terrorists were arrested and cases are going on. All those who were arrested were detained during my time. However, no one has made public the exact perpetrators who executed the Easter Sunday terror attacks. However, I know who they are. If the court makes a request or an order, I am ready to reveal it. In addition, it is the responsibility of the justices to maintain the secrecy surrounding this revelation.
ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම ඒ ඉතාමත්ව රහසිගතව තබා ගැනීම ඒ විනිශ්චයකාරතුමන්ලාගේත් වගකීමක් වෙනවා.
The former president was attending an event at the historic Gedige Viharaya in Kandy. Former Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa immersed himself in discussion with the Mahanayaka Theras in Kandy. At the Askiri Mahavihara, Rajapaksa met with Mahanayaka Askiri chapter of the Siam sect, the Most Venerable Varakagoda Sri Jnanaratna Mahanayaka Thera, and presented a copy of the book titled The Conspiracy, which is about ousting him from the presidency. Gotabaya Rajapaksa visited the registrar of the Askiri chapter of the Siam sect, the Most Venerable Dr. Naram Panave Ananda Thera. Thereafter, Gotabaya Rajapaksa paid homage to the temple of the sacred tooth relic. He later called on the Mahanayaka of the Malwatu chapter of the Siam sect, the Most Venerable Thibbatu Wave Sri Sumangala Mahanayaka Thera, as well as the Anunayakas of the Malwatu chapter of the Siam sect, the Most Venerable Dimbul Kumbure Sri Vimala Dhamma Thera, and Most Venerable Niyangoda Vijita Siri Thera.
Former Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa visited Anuradhapura to pay reverence to the Jai Shri Mahabodhi. The former president also called on the Atamasthanaadhipati Venerable Pallegama Hemaratna Thero.
We are ready for any election. However, Basil has proposed the ideal option. We should have the parliamentary election first and then the presidential election. If not, any faction that secures the presidential election will also draw the victory in favour of them at the parliamentary election. If there needs to be justice, the parliamentary election should be held first and then the presidential election.
Former President Mahinda Rajapaksa also took part in religious events at the Ruwanvali Mahasaya in Anuradhapura. Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe has called for collaborative efforts to transform the north into a leading economic hub. President Ranil Wickremesinghe made these remarks while attending the Urumaya Freehold Deeds program held in Ottakapulam, Jaffna this morning.
We are commencing the agricultural modernization program. We have selected one divisional secretariat from each district to execute this. Smart agriculture will be initiated to increase the revenue. Therefore, I know and I hope that we can see the best results from Walikamam in Jaffna. All of those lands must be released to the rightful owners. We know that it is not easy to engage in smart agriculture with no support. The agricultural centers of three forces together will have to provide the support they need. If this is not initiated in the north, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission will be established. So we need to start a new economy. Agriculture is one thing. There is a large amount of solar energy and wind energy from Vaunia to Jaffna.
408 land deeds were granted to the people of Jaffna as part of the Urumaya program, which aims to provide free land rights to 2 million individuals. The president symbolically participated in the awarding of the deeds. The release of lands previously utilized by the Jaffna Security Force headquarters was conducted at the Palali Air Force Base. Jaffna Commander Major General Chandana Wickremesinghe presented the official land release documents to President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Subsequently, President Wickremesinghe handed over the documents to Jaffna District Governor Maradalingam Pradeepan. As per the arrangement, 234 acres of land from 5 Gramaniledari divisions in Walikamam North were granted to the local public. These lands are intended for agricultural purposes in alignment with the government's agricultural modernization program. The hunger strike by a group of northern fishermen against the illegal fishing by Indian fishers in the Sea of Sri Lanka was called off today. Now, another demonstration took place opposite the Indian consulate in Jaffna, supporting the fishermen engaged in the hunger strike. Northern fishers marched from the site of the hunger strike to the Consulate General of India in Jaffna. Fisherfolk representing 12 organizations took part in this protest.
No head of state, no minister, no Indian consular officer has spoken to us till now. That is why we are protesting here today. We will continue this until we are provided with solutions.
5 representatives were later given an opportunity to hold discussions with the Indian Deputy High Commissioner, Sevitisai Murali. Minister of Fisheries Douglas Devananda met with the fisherfolk who engaged in the hunger strike.
The Chief Minister of Pondicherry sent me a letter. It arrived about 3 or 4 days earlier. The Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu also wrote to me. But since the dates for elections have been announced there, the letter will be sent to me after discussions with the Election Commissioner. I've told them both that I'll be ready for discussions only if they make a promise to stop their fisherfolk from carrying illegal fishing activities in the Sea of Sri Lanka.
Following the assurance given by the minister, the group called off their 5-day hunger strike.
Newsfirst with the people. When's the election?
President Ranil Wickremesinghe engaged in a crucial discussion with Basil Rajapaksa, the founder of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, in Colombo yesterday afternoon. SLPP spokesperson parliamentarian Sanjeeva Edirimana told reporters that during this meeting, Basil Rajapaksa conveyed a clear message. His party favours a general election.
ඒ හමුවේදී ඊළඟ ජාතික මැතිවරණයට අදාළ සාකච්ඡා කළ කාරණාව තමයි පක්ෂයක්.
The meeting was centered around the next election and the party's position favouring a general election was conveyed. There was no outcome at the meeting with regard to what the upcoming election would be. We should not panic on such matters, and that is what Basil Rajapaksa had conveyed. The president had also expressed his position. In addition, on behalf of the SLPP, Basil Rajapaksa had noted that a discussion is brewing about the change in the election system. He noted that the people are concerned whether this is an attempt to delay the elections, and that is very much unfavourable. The president said that these two elections will not be delayed. It was announced that all future national elections will take place as scheduled.
නිශ්චිත දිනවකවානුවලට අනුව ඉදිරි ජාතික මැතිවරණ සියල්ල පවත්වන බව තමයි එතුමා සඳහන් කරලා තියෙන්නේ.
Meanwhile, Dayasiri Jayasekara, a member of parliament, has boldly declared that if all parties within his alliance extend a request, he will enter the presidential race with confidence. His assertion came during his appearance on today's Newsline segment.
මානුෂීය ජනතා සන්ධානය. එතකොට
You call it the Humane People's Alliance. Does it mean nothing humane has taken place so far?
කාලයක් දේශපාලනය කළ පුද්ගලෙක් පළාත් සභාවේ ඉඳලම පටන් ගත්තේ. ඒතකොට මෙච්චර කල් මානුෂික දේවල් කළේ නැද්ද ඔබතුමා?
මානුෂීය දේවල් කරලා තියෙනවා. හැබැයි මේ මානුෂීය දේවල් හරියට කරනවා නම්
Humane events have taken place. However, if those humane events took place in a proper manner, the country would not be in this situation. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the candidate from the leftist progressive force, was chased away. The Rajapaksas are now trying to bring a right-wing leader. This is for the sake of protecting the Rajapaksa family and their power. However, if the SLPP put forward their candidate back then, the left wing will have a candidate for the presidential race.
අද වමට නායකයෙක් ඉන්නවා.
ඔබ කියන වම මොකද්ද?
අපි කියන්නේ වම අපේ නියම වම අපි ගාව තියෙන්නේ. මම හැම විටම මේ රටේ පල්ලෙහා ඉන්න මිනිස්සු ගැන දුකෙන් වේදනාවෙන් කල්පනා කරන මිනිහ.
ඒ සන්ධානයේ නායකයා ජනාධිපති අපේක්ෂකයා විදියට තේරුව ලෑස්තිද?
මම අර කිව්ව විදියට සියලුම දෙනා එකතු වෙලා කතා කරමු.
If everyone puts forward a request, I have no issue. I have no issue with the Muslims, Tamils, Sinhalese, UNP, SJB, SSP or even the Communist Party. If I am given the opportunity, I will be committed to it. I will also win.
මම හැම කෙනෙකුටම ආදරය කරන කෙනෙක්. මට ඒ අවස්ථාව දුන්නොත් ඒ වෙනුවෙන් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම පෙන්ලා වැඩ කරනවා අනිවාර්යයෙන්. විතර නෙමෙයි දිල්ලත් පෙන්වනවා.
The UNP's top ranks have announced that the current president Ranil Wickremesinghe will run for president. However, it has not been revealed with which alliance he will align with. The SJB has declared their opposition leader Sajid Premadasa will run for president, and the Jatika Jana Balawege has announced its leader Anurukumara Dissanayake will be the candidate for the presidential pool. In addition, MP Dhammika Perera, leader of the Maubina Janata Party Dilip Jayavira, former PUCSL chairman Janaka Ratnayaka have also expressed their intentions of running for president.
Wins the election.
Leader of the Jatika Jana Balawege commenced his tour of Canada. He was welcomed to Canada on the Toronto airport by a group of Sri Lankans living there. Anurukumara Dissanayake is expected to attend several public meetings in Toronto and Vancouver, Canada.
Leader of the opposition Sajid Premadasa drew the attention of the parliament to the amendments proposed by the government to the penal code.
Regarding the draft bill to amend section 363 and 364 of para 9 of the penal code published on the 13th of February, through this draft bill it will restrict female children below the age of 16 and 14 in engaging in sexual intercourse. It will also lessen the severity of punishments imposed on male offenders if the accused is below the age of 22. Through this draft bill, both male and females will be brought under the purview of one provision. There is a demand from women that provision against abuse must be implemented. Provisions against rape for males is stated under 376(5)(b), but there is no issue in explicitly stating the various detriments faced by men. If needed, it can be amended, but women in the country have strictly objected to bringing detriments faced by men and women under the same provision. This is a wrong procedure. Please stop this.
මේක වැරදි ක්‍රියාවක්. මේ වැරදි ක්‍රියාව නතර කරන්නට මේක අත්හිටවලා ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න කියලා මම ගෞරවයෙන් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා.
තුමාගේ ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම මම අධිකරණ ඇමතුමාගේ අවධානයට යොමු කරනවා.
What is this new legal amendment? The Sri Lankan legal landscape is witnessing a significant development with the proposed amendment to sections 363 and 364 of the Penal Code. The proposed amendments have been published via Gazette. This amendment introduces a provision for a suspended prison sentence in specific circumstances. Notably, if an offender aged under 22 engages in sexual intercourse with a victim aged 14 or over but under 16, consented by the latter, this amendment comes into effect. In cases where consent is affirmed, however, if evidence is lacking, the proposal suggests an option to impose a punishment lower than the mandated minimum penalty.
So in terms of the law as it stands today, a person who commits statutory rape on a girl under the age of 16 would, upon conviction, would have to face a minimum mandatory sentence of rigorous imprisonment for a term not less than 10 years and not exceeding 20 years, and may be ordered to pay compensation as well. But the law also, it is provided that where there was consent by the girl who was under the age of 16 and the offender is a person who is under the age of 18, that the court is empowered to impose a term of imprisonment for less than 10 years. However, this does not apply if the offender is more than 18 years of age. The new amendment, which is now being discussed and reviewed, to a great extent seeks to legislate on this matter, which has been evolved by the judiciary and seeks to bring in some new parameters. That is a case where there is consent and the existence of an intimate relationship in respect of a girl between the age of 14 and 16 and the offender under 22 years to suspend the sentence. And also where there is no consent but an intimate relationship is proven, to permit the court to order lesser mandatory minimum sentence.
Sri Lanka's Prevention of Terrorism Act and the Online Safety Act came under fire at a recent session of the UK Parliament.
Sri Lanka's human rights record cast a long shadow, demanding a firm international response, and the UK, along with other nations, has a crucial role in holding the country accountable. Firstly, those accused of human rights crimes cannot escape unscathed. Targeted sanctions against officials can deliver a powerful message. Additionally, the principle of universal jurisdiction allows countries to pursue legal actions against perpetrators on their own soil, regardless of where the crimes were committed. And furthermore, Sri Lanka's potential breaches of human rights treaties cannot be ignored. The ICJ can be a forum used to address these issues, specifically those of torture, enforced disappearance and racial discrimination.
As acknowledged in this debate's brief, the Online Safety Act and indeed other proposed and enacted laws by Sri Lanka severely limit civil liberties, and they quite clearly do. So how are these laws impacting upon freedom of religion or belief? The right to freedoms of expression and assembly are heavily intertwined with the fate of four. The question for our government must be, have we been moved as much to do all we can? And if not, will we begin this movement today? The right to live, to work and to hold your own beliefs are something that we take for granted in this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But we are tasked with the responsibility, Dame Maria, of speaking up for those who don't have those human rights or those freedom of religious rights in Sri Lanka.
Earlier this month, Human Rights Watch reported on the proposed new law, which they say will severely curtail civil liberties. New laws which include an Online Safety Act, Electronic Media and Broadcasting Authority Bill and a Non-Governmental Organisation Supervision and Registration Bill. These will grant broad powers to security forces and severely restrict their rights to freedom of assembly, association, expression, one which will impact not only the civic space but also the business environment. Dame Maria, Sri Lanka appears to be going backwards in terms of adherence to the principles that we hold dear of upholding and protecting fundamental human rights.
Civil society continues to face surveillance, intimidation and harassment by state authorities, and those points were eloquently set out during some of the contributions we have heard today. We're concerned about a trend towards a more constrained civic space. This includes the use of laws to limit freedoms of expression and assembly, such as the misuse of the International Covenant on Civil and political rights, or the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the PTA, which was referred to earlier. Britain continues to call for the replacement of the draconian PTA with legislation that is consistent with Sri Lanka's international obligations and to uphold a moratorium on the use of the provisions of the PTA. We're also concerned about the Online Safety Act. Recently passed, it has the potential to restrict severely online communication and could potentially criminalise many forms of expressions. And Dame Maria, proposals to strengthen the regulation of NGOs and of broadcast media raises fears of efforts to restrict civic space.
The Hindu reports that Sri Lanka is close to finalizing a debt treatment plan with India and the Paris Club.
According to sources cited by the Hindu, Sri Lanka is on the verge of finalizing a debt treatment plan in collaboration with India and the Paris Club. The proposed plan is expected to include a moratorium of up to 6 years and a reduced interest rate during the repayment period. The Colombo-based source speaking to the Hindu emphasized the negotiations have reached an advanced stage and formal agreement terms are anticipated imminently. As many of 17 countries that have extended loans to Sri Lanka formed the committee last year for ease and debt restructuring negotiations. Notably, China has chosen not to participate directly in the OCC platform but has been attending meetings as an observer. The Hindu reported Colombo has consistently assured the OCC that it will engage in negotiations for the repayment of Chinese loans on terms comparable to those agreed upon with other creditors. On Thursday, the IMF announced that the IMF staff and the Sri Lankan authorities have reached tough-level agreement on economic policies to conclude the second review of the 4-year EFF-supported program and the 2024 Article 4 consultation. Once the review is approved by the IMF management and completed by the IMF Executive Board, Sri Lanka will have access to 250 million standing deposit rate, which is about $337 million in financing.
The Symphony Orchestra of Sri Lanka proudly presents SOSL Concert, a musical masterpiece conducted by Kiko Kobayashi with the world premiere of Lalnath De Silva's first cello concert with soloist Dushanti Pereira, Juan Supé's Light Cavalry Overture and Brahms' First Symphony. 23rd of March, 7 p.m. onwards at the Lionel Wendt Theatre. Tickets available now. Electronic media sponsors: Yes 101, Legends 966, Newsfirst and TV1.
Welcome back to the news. Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara shedding light on Sri Lanka's strategic approach towards enhancing its energy landscape through collaboration with India and other regional partners, emphasized the significance of interconnectivity and the potential for renewable energy integration.
The launch of the Climate Parliament Sri Lanka took place in Colombo and it was endorsed as a parliamentary caucus on 9 January 2024.
The interconnectivity that we are discussing with India and with our development partners is to see that we have some sort of connectivity with India, but it also connects with the BIMSTEC countries, regional countries. So these regional connectivities will allow Sri Lanka to share the excess renewable potential that we have. Of course, initially with the cost factors that is in Sri Lanka, I would say it will initially help Sri Lanka import power for our own requirements. But in the future, when the investments come, when the infrastructure develops, when the development comes for renewable energy, it allows Sri Lanka to export power and be energy independent as well. A lot of people also mistake that renewable energy is cheap. Sri Lanka has estimated over the next 6 years, 24 to 2030, in our infrastructure development plan, we need at least a $7 billion investment to have the transmission lines and the grid development to take place to integrate the renewable energy requirements. Unfortunately, the government cannot invest on $7 billion investment. That's where the private investments has to come in for this infrastructure.
The Power and Energy Minister also addressed concerns surrounding the Mannar wind power project.
We need to understand that all sorts of development has some sort of effect on the environment. That's why we need to have environmental impact mitigation tools to address those issues. We can't just run away and say we are just going to not utilize those resources because of an environmental concern that we have. Just because we can't use it doesn't mean that we can find a different area to go and do a wind farm. People do say, okay, maybe you can look at other areas as knuckles, but the challenge that Sri Lanka has, getting wind turbines to a coastal area is challenging. Imagine taking that into a mountain area, the wind blades, the turbines and everything, the transportation, logistics, that's required to do that, and the cost at which it will have to be operated at.
Climate Parliament in South Asia has been actively collaborating with parliamentarians from South Asian countries, including India, Bangladesh, Nepal and Bhutan for the past 10 years. Given the escalating challenges posed by climate change in the region, particularly in Sri Lanka, Climate Parliament is also working towards establishing a regional parliamentary forum for South Asian regional energy cooperation.
A plant quarantine unit was set up at the Jaffna Post Office by the Department of Agriculture.
Plant quarantine unit was set up at the Jaffna Post Office by the Department of Agriculture. Minister of Fisheries Douglas Devananda, Governor of the Northern Province PSM Charles and Champika Hevage, the Additional Director National Plant Quarantine Unit, attended the event. Plant quarantine unit will function as a unit for export of agriculture products, including microorganisms, to foreign countries. Goods will be inspected at the plant quarantine unit and upon passing the requirements, a certificate will be issued permitting the export.
It is a very useful requirement for the farmers in Northern Province to send their products to their relations as well as export products. Even though the Customs Department and the National Plant Quarantine Service of the Agriculture Department are already functioning at KKA's port and Palali Airport, there has been a huge hindrance in the process of sending parcels to relatives living overseas. These obstacles are no more with this new unit.
இடையூறாக இருந்தது இந்த செயல்பாட்டினூடாக அந்த தடை தற்போது தவிர்க்கப்பட்டுள்ளது.
Gammadda completed yet another project at the Akkarapattane Bharati Preschool.
195 families in Akkarapattane, Nuvarelia depend on the income they generate by working in their estates. The children of Bharati Preschool face several challenges, including the lack of material and proper electricity supply to smoothen their education journey. Today, Gammadda stepped forward to help facilitate the children of Bharati Preschool with an electricity supply after almost 20 years. The Gammadda team was warmly welcomed by Bharati Preschool. Financial support for this project was given by Mr. and Mrs. Nadesan.
Will Arvind Kejriwal's arrest unite India's opposition? Now, Kenza and Thinal bring us the details on tonight's The World Today.
So in today's The World Today, we're going to take a look at some hot news that has been happening in one of our neighboring countries. Now, Thinal, the Indian Delhi Chief Minister has been arrested, and can you please tell us why and what is the reason behind this arrest?
Yeah, Kenza. So the Delhi Chief Minister, who is a prominent opposition leader, Arvind Kejriwal, he has been arrested by India's Financial Crime Agency in connection with corruption allegations related to the city's liquor policy, Kenza. And
could you please tell us, Thinal, on who Arvind Kejriwal is?
Well, he's a mechanical engineer, and in 2006 he was awarded the Ramon Magsaysay Award for emergent leadership in the recognition of his involvement in the grassroots level movements, and he used the right to information legislation in a campaign against corruption.
Now, Thinal, in 2012, he launched the Aam Aadmi Party, which won in the 2013 Delhi Legislative Assembly election. Following the election, he took office as the Chief Minister of Delhi on the 28th of December 2013.
Well, Kenza, do you know that he resigned 49 days later on the 14th of February in 2014? stating he did it because the minority government's inability to pass his proposed anti-corruption legislation due to a lack of support from the other political parties.
Then in 2015, Thinal, his party won the Delhi Assembly elections with a historic majority, obtaining 67 out of 70 assembly seats. Now, India's Enforcement Directorate has been investigating corruption allegations in a liquor policy implemented by Kejriwal's government in 2022. Now, Thinal, could you tell us more about the policy alone?
Yes, the policy allegedly gave undue advantages to private retailers. Well, before the arrest, Kenza, the agency had summoned Kejriwal 9 times, but he had not responded. He refused to appear before the authorities. Well, you know, since Modi came into power in 2014, 95% of the cases taken up by the Central Bureau of Investigations, which is India's premier investigative agency, had the ED have been against politicians from the opposition party.
Now, the opposition, the arrest of the Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal by India's Financial Crime Investigation Agency has triggered near unanimous condemnation from the country's fragile opposition. Some leaders are warning of people's revolution against Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
This looks like a very systematic plan by the Bharatiya Janata Party to suppress the voice of one of the leaders of the India Alliance. What they are trying to do is probably arrest all leaders of the India Alliance, the opposition that is speaking in the Bharatiya Janata Party, so that nobody is there during the election.
Kejriwal's arrest weeks before the first round of India's mammoth 7-phase national elections comes on the heels of similar arrest of opposition leaders by law enforcement agencies. Now, Thina, shifting our attention to some more international news that has been making headlines since the 7th of October. Now, this might not seem very new to a lot of people, but there are so many things that happens that day-to-day activities that happen that is not talked about much. Now, when it comes to war, war in any country, there are certain international humanitarian law which needs to be followed. Now, according to the international humanitarian law, which is the branch of the international law that seeks to impose limits on the destruction and suffering caused by armed conflict, it has few principles. Starting off, now when it comes to war, there are certain things that need to be followed. Starting off with the principle of humanity, and then we move on to principle of distinction between civilians and combatants, and principle of proportionality, and finally principle of military necessity. Now, Tinal, according to the UNICEF, more than 600,000 children are trapped in Rafah alone with nowhere safe to go. Their homes have been destroyed, their families have been torn apart.
Well, hospitals and schools must be protected from bombings, and they must not be used for military purposes in accordance with international humanitarian law. Kinza, what's the latest from Gaza?
Israeli forces have prevented hundreds of Muslim worshippers seeking to perform Friday prayers from entering the Al-Aqsa Mosque. According to foreign media, now witnesses told foreign media that troops greatly intensified their military presence in the vicinity of the Qalandia and Zaytun and Bethlehem checkpoints, which are the 3 checkpoints that people from the Palestinians can enter to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and which the mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is also a holy place for Muslims. Now, the Israeli forces reportedly returned hundreds of worshippers from these checkpoints, claiming they did not have the necessary permits. Now, foreign media adds that hundreds of soldiers have been deployed around the mosque. Israel restricted the entry of Palestinians and Muslim Israelis to the mosque in the holy Islamic month of Ramadan, where most Muslims seek to pray at the mosque. Now, we know that this the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has been saying certain things about this. So what is Anthony Blinken saying regarding to the situation in Israel and Gaza now?
Yeah, well, the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken returned to Israel today as a part of an intensive diplomatic push to reach, he says, and I quote, sustained an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and deter an Israeli offensive into Rafah. Well, the stop in Tel Aviv caps Blinken's 6th round of shuttle diplomacy in the region since the deadly attacks on the 7th of October. Well, he arrived in the country just around 10 a.m. local time and he met with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli war cabinet as the stakes around on the ongoing war mount.
Now, the Israel Defense Forces, also known as the IDF, now claims to have killed over 140 terrorists in ongoing fighting at Al-Shifa and to have made some 600 arrests, including dozens of top Hamas commanders, as well as some from Islamic Jihad. 2 Israeli soldiers have also been killed amidst the war. Now, Israeli reports suggest that in recent weeks, the army found that senior Hamas figures has resumed operations at Al-Shifa, and that took some even took their families to the hospital. Now, the IDF says it uncovered arms caches and a large quantity of cash at the site. Now, Hamas has denied that its fighters were based there and claims that those killed were wounded and patients and displaced people. So that brings us to the end of the world today for this evening. Stay tuned for Newsfirst for more. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Kenza Farouk.
And I'm Tilal Tilakaratne.
On the 23rd of March, music enthusiasts are in for a treat as the Symphony of Orchestra presents a captivating concert featuring the revered Varnam composition. Now, this will be alongside a mesmerizing cello concerto performance by the acclaimed Dushyanti Pereira.
On March 23rd, music enthusiasts are in for a treat as the Symphony of Orchestra presents a captivating concert. Their few pieces of composer and conductor Lalana de Silva will be premiered for the first time in the world.
I'm delighted to have my new cello concerto performed by the Symphony Orchestra of Sri Lanka, conducted by the Japanese conductor Keiko Kobayashi and one of our leading cellists, Dushyanti Pereira, playing the solo part. A cello concerto is really a musical dialogue between the cello on the one hand and the orchestra on the other. And in this new cello concerto, which by the way is the first of its kind to be composed by a South Asian composer, I'm trying to capture and embed Sri Lankan drumming rhythms into the composition. For example, you will hear in the third movement the Turanga Varnam being used as a theme, and I develop a set of variations on it. And I'm sure all Sri Lankans would love the last movement, which is in the style of a baila.
And that's a wrap of this Friday's edition of Primetime News on TV1. Thank you for watching. Take care and good night.